Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're delighted to have this webinar with Yves Cuilleron, who is based in Chamonix in the Northern Rhone, and he makes wonderful wines. Yves can tell you more about his history, but he started from very small beginnings, and today he has an amazing domain. And all I can say is he makes wonderful wines. And we've been lucky enough to work with Yves for, must be around about 20 years now. And his wines just get better and better, and we're delighted to have them. Yves, tell us more about how you started.
So my first vintage, it's 1987. So now it's 33 years. It's begin to be a long time. It's a family vineyard. I am the third generation. It's my grandfather who began in 1920. After it was my uncle in 1960. And me, my first harvest, 1987.
Wow.
But it was, when I began, it was very small. It was only 4 hectares of vineyard and only 2 appellations. At this time, it was Condrieu and Saint-Joseph.
Amazing. Just trying to get, sorry, the dog's jumping in the way.
So how many, Yves, now, how many hectares do you have now?
And so now I have nearly 70 hectares.
Wow.
And 6 crus. So rapidly, I found some land in Côte-Rôtie because it's not far from my winery. So I have first Côte-Rôtie, Condrieu, Saint-Joseph, and after Côte-Rôtie. And in 2006, in the same year, I found land in Cornos and Saint-Péret. And more recently, in 2012, I began to produce Gros Hermitage. So now I have 6 crus from Northern Rhone, and it means only 2 crus. It means Chateaubriand and Hermitage.
Fantastic.
And I produce also IGP wine. Donc in Northern Rhone, we can produce wine called IGP Colline Rhodanienne. So it's a vineyard plant around the cru we have, and I plant the variety we have in Northern Rhone, and on the label it's the name of the grapes. So I make wine with Viognier, with Syrah, with Marsanne, Roussanne.
Fantastic.
So, yes, so here you see the history of the man. So my grandfather in 1920, my uncle in 1960. So me, I begin with only 3 hectares and a half in 1987. In 1992, I built a new winery because before it was under the house of my uncle. It was very small. In 1996, we make with 2 other friends, François Villard and Pierre Gaillard, we make the company Les Vins de Vienne. And the idea was at the time to replant an old vineyard, which disappeared at the beginning of the 20th century. And we decided together to recreate this vineyard. In 1999, I make a second extension of my winery because every year I plant new vineyard, and more I have vine, more I need place to make the vinification and to stock the bottle. So in 2006 it was Saint-Péret and Cornos extension. 2007 another extension of the winery. 2012 my first Gros Hermitage. 2013, I make a joint venture with a Californian producer, and we decide together to produce one Syrah. So we do that since 2013. 14, it was my first white Gros Hermitage. So in 2015, changed a little my range of cuvée, and I decided to use the lieu-dit on the label. And in 2015 also, I extend again a new winery. So now I have a big winery, I have more place, and I can make a vinification with a high quality because I use the gravity. I have a very nice place to make a great wine. And in 2019, I have two new cuvées. It's a lieu-dit in Condrieu and in Côte-Rôtie. Donc le lieu-dit Verlieu for Condrieu and le lieu-dit Vialière for Côte-Rôtie.
Fantastic, thank you. And Yves, you've got a lot of people saying hello to you this evening already.
Yes, hello for everybody.
And also, if anyone has any questions at any time for Yves during the webinar over the next hour, feel free to ask them at any time. If there's, and also kind of if you have any favorite wines from Yves, if you've got questions on those as well. And Yves, just wondering, the sound, I'm not quite hearing it loud enough. It might be that the mic, it might be just worth coming a little bit closer to the mic.
Montez le son.
Oui, s'il vous plaît.
Ou parlez plus fort.
Merci, c'est très gentil. Juste un petit peu, mais ce serait très gentil. Merci.
Je sais, le son.
Oh non.
Non, c'est coupé maintenant.
Je ne sais pas où je veux régler, mais
C'est bien maintenant.
C'est déjà beaucoup.
Je vais essayer de parler plus fort, oui.
Oui, super.
Ça, c'est parfait.
Super, merci. Et donc, les appellations ici.
So now as you can see, I have 6 different crus in Northern Rhone, with 9 hectares in Côte-Rôtie, 15 hectares in Condrieu, in Saint-Joseph, 7 hectares in white, 20 in red, white Gros Hermitage 1 hectare, red Gros Hermitage 7 hectares, 4 hectares in Saint-Péret, and 2 hectares in Carmas. So the grapes we use for all these crus is the traditional variety from Northern Rhone, Syrah for the red, and Viognier, Marsanne, and Roussanne for the white. And I also have a new project since 4 or 5 years now. It's to replant all the variety, but this old variety from the origin of Northern Rhone. And its variety will normally disappear. And the idea is to try to come back to make wine with this old variety. To perhaps it can be interesting to test this new wine because I begin to make vinification with Persan, Durif, Chatus, and it's interesting because there is not too much alcohol and a good level of acidity, and perhaps with global warming, this variety can perhaps help us to make wine with more balance.
And they were previously planted in the Northern Rhone, weren't they, Yves, you were saying? They used to be in the Northern Rhone.
What?
Ils sont des cépages que dans le passé, ils étaient...
Yes, the origin is Northern Rhone or around. So some variety come from 100 kilometers around the Northern Rhone, yes.
And you can't call them... well, you were telling me about it earlier. There are different wines that you can call IGP, and it depends on the wine, doesn't it?
Yes, some of this variety we can use. You can use IGP because they are on the list of the IGP. Some of them we can't because it's not on the list, so we can sell it in Vin de France. So I can speak a little more about each of them. So Persan, it's a variety, the real origin, it's Savoie. So, but there is this variety in Savoie, but also in a Rhone Valley. So you can find easily some wine with Persan from Savoie, but there is the tradition to plant Persan also in Northern Rhone. Durif, it's a grape variety. The origin is really the Northern Rhone, but these grapes totally disappear. But this grape is known because if you drink Petite Syrah from California, in fact, it's a Durif.
Okay. Oh, really?
And in California, they make a mistake. They believe they take a selection of Petite Syrah from Northern Rhone, but they make a mistake. They take Durif.
Right.
And all the wine called Petite Syrah from California, it's Durif.
Okay.
Really? Okay. We'll have to ask Turley about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Chatus, it's a variety from the Ardèche, so the south of Northern Rhone. Dureza, it's the father of the Syrah. So the Syrah variety, it's the blend of two varieties. Of the father, it's Dureza, and the mother, it's a Mondeuse Blanche. It's a grape variety from Savoie. So the Syrah, and Dureza come from Ardèche too. So it's between Ardèche and Savoie. So the Syrah, the origin is really Northern Rhone.
Okay.
The Bia, it's a white variety. I read an old book that it's a very interesting variety to make white, but I never taste wine with it. It's nearly disappear. We just find some and we begin to replant it, and I never taste again, so I can't speak about the Bia, but I read an old book that it was a very interesting variety for white. Okay. And the last variety is Arban. And Arban, in fact, it's a variety for, it's a white variety too for champagne. But I read an old book, it's a variety, the origin, it's the north of Côte-Rôtie.
Okay.
And now it's just a little planted in Champagne. And so, because the origin is Northern Rhone, I want to plant it again. So I plant on 6 different varieties.
And Yves, it sounds like a sales type thing, but when are these wines available? But genuinely, are they I don't actually know. Are they when are they available to be enjoyed?
The wine. So we begin the first vineyard I plant was a Persan and Durif. Mm-hmm. So now I begin to sell my first Persan Durif. So I make wine in the first vintage was 17.
Okay.
But it was only 1 barrique of each. The second vintage 18. I finished to sell it. And I just bottled the 19 now because all these wine age 18 months in barrels. Right. And with the 19 vintage, I will have a Chatus too. So the next vintage, 19, I will have a Persan, Durif, and Chatus.
Fantastic.
Wow. And they're all bottled by grape variety. They're not blended together.
For instance, I want to know each variety, so I need to make the vinification alone of each to understand each variety, because for me it's new, and that is very exciting to discover a new variety. It's old variety, but it's new because it disappears. So and I will see perhaps later. Perhaps I can make a blend because it will work. It don't work alone, perhaps. I don't know. But for instance, I want to make each. But I'm very happy with the first vinification. Persan, Durif, Chatus. I'm very happy with my first wine. Yes.
Fantastic. And you've got a few comments here as well, Yves. Victor from Chez Bruce says, great, you can find some Durif in the Valais in Switzerland. And that is a continuation, of course, of the Rhone. And just seeing the next.
We've got a comment from George Reed. He says, hi, Yves. Thanks for giving me a job 10 years ago for the 2011 vintage. Expect you didn't employ another Englishman after me. It was good times, and I enjoyed the 3-course lunches alongside free wine and beer. Your conjure is still top notch.
Another one from Marcel, who says, Bonjour, Yves. How much of your land is held under fermage? Chats come from the Vivere, I think. Any plans to plant in the southern Ardèche? Did you hear that, Yves?
What?
Yeah, Marcel Williams.
Yes.
How much of your land is held under fermage?
Yes. On my 70 hectares, 45 I am owner, and 25-30 it's renting. Yes.
Okay.
Fermage.
And do you have any plans to plant in the southern Ardèche?
I have vineyard in Ardèche. I have vineyard in Saint-Joseph, in the village of Sarah. I have 4 hectares of Saint-Joseph in Sarah. I have a little vineyard also in Serrières, it's the northern Ardèche. And Sapere and Konos, it's Ardèche too. But not southern Ardèche. Yeah.
Great.
Great.
Great. And I think, yeah, if you could tell us, like it says here, a bit about your viticulture as well, Yves, and how you work in the vineyards.
So how I work the vineyard?
Yes.
So for instance, in the vineyard, I try to, we call in France a culture raisonnée. I don't know the translation in English.
I think we use the same term, actually. Yeah, we borrow your term.
Yes. So since I begin, and my uncle before me used to work like that. He tried to make the less treatment as possible. Don't use insecticide, only organic fertilizer, and I work with so always work in this spirit. Now my domain have a label HVE, High Value Environmental, and now because it's important for the market, certainly I decided to certainly next year to come to be organic production.
Wow.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Brilliant.
But in Northern Rhone, it's very difficult because it's a vineyard in terraces. It's for that there is not a lot of, for instance, there is not a lot of producer totally organic in Northern Rhone because the fact to be in terraces, it's a very difficult. It needs to work by hand a lot, and it's very expensive to produce organic in Northern Rhone. But now it's more and more important. The market wants more and more. So I was culture raisonnée, but it's not enough now, and I have to change.
No, fantastic. And I believe that we've just become or are becoming certified in a sense as well. But with the dreaded Brexit word, we had to apply to be an organic company importing organic wines. You had to do it officially, so we're pleased to be that now as well. But, despite it all, and you've got a question here from Jonathan Sutton saying, in the last 6 years, which is the best Syrah vintage?
In the last 5.
6. Les derniers 6 ans. Quel était le meilleur pour le Syrah?
We have the last 6 years since the vintage 15. It's a very good vintage because we have always a very good weather during the harvest time. So we don't have a rut. We don't have to make some selection. It's a very easy harvest. And 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, it's a really good vintage. The two bigger vintage, it's a 15 and 18 for the red, for Syrah. And perhaps vintage with the more potential to age, it's 15, but it's not the more drinkable, the more finesse. It's a very tannic. It's a very strong 15.
Mhm.
But certainly with a very, very big potential of aging. 18, it's a big concentration too, but more soft than 15. 16 is it's the more fresh, the more elegant. 17 is more body than 16, but less than 18. And we have also the two last vintage, 19 and 20, are very good too, with a good balance, good quality of tannin, very ripe. So I'm very happy since 6 years. It's very easy to make. So the quality is very homogeneous. Each parcel.
And there's a question here also, Yves. Could you tell us a bit about your different soil types?
What?
Le terroir, les sols. Est-ce que vous pouvez en parler un peu
Le terroir
du terroir, du sol, du terrain?
Oui. So the Northern Rhone, it's very specific area. It's the vineyard. It's mainly granitic. It's Massif Central, the origin. It's all mountain from France, and it's very steep. It's in terraces. So the fact it's granitic, it's very dry because the granite it's a sand and it's very drainy for the rain. So we are always on very dry soil, and it gives a lot of minerality in the wine. We have, for example, we have more minerality in the right side of the Rhone than in Gros Hermitage. It's a sediment soil. The granite gives more minerality and for me more potential to age. And the fact it's in terraces, it's a very concentrated grapes, and for that Côte-Rôtie, the Cornas, Saint-Joseph make wine with a good potential of aging.
Okay.
Okay, brilliant. I think I went forward on that.
Great. And could you just tell us a little bit about your vinification method
Yes,
as well?
I can begin by the white. So my philosophy is to have a very beautiful grapes with a good ripeness, and after to make a simple vinification in traditional process. And for me, is the best way to have the best expression of the terroir. So simple vinification, it means I try to use the less oenologic product as possible. So for me, all my wine, white or red, it's natural yeast. I don't add enzyme, tannins, the less oenologic product as possible. For me, the idea is to make the wine the most. If you have a beautiful grape, you don't need to correct, to add, and to have the best expression of the terroir, it's to make the more simple as possible, and to use the traditional process, because for me the appellation it's a long history from very long time, and to follow the tradition, it's also to keep the terroir and the history of the wine and the expression of the wine. So for the white, it's all hand harvested. It's directly pressed. It's decanted in tank 1 day or 2 days, and after fermentation begin directly on oak. For the white, I use two kinds of oak. I use the barrels. Barrels, it's a small size, it's 220 liters. And I use foudre. Foudre, it's 3,000 liters. And for the white, the fact to ferment in a big size, you preserve more the fruity, the freshness, And at the opposite, the barrels, you have more exchange with the leaves, with the oxygen, and it makes a wine with more body, more richness. And so for the white, I blend the richness of the barrels with the freshness of the food. And like that, I have a balance in my white wine, fruity, but with a body. And the wine ferment on oak. He always stay on the lees during, he do the malo slowly during the winter. And I bottle my white just before the summer in May, June. It's for the white. And the red, it's unharvested also. The red is different. We make maceration of grapes. So the grapes don't go in press, but go in a tank and ferment together the grapes. For the red, I always let 1% of all cluster to keep some stain. But I adapt at each vintage, at each parcel. I don't let 100% of all cluster. It depends the vintage. So, but always a percentage. I think in the average, I have 30% of stain in maceration. After I make a maceration fermentation of 3 weeks in the average, and just after the maceration, the red go in barrels. But for the red, it's only barrels. No food, no, because Syrah like the small size. Syrah like to have more oxygen, and it's more reductive variety. And I make some tries in the bigger size. I always prefer the barrels. So 100% of my red go in aging in barrels, and more long time than the white. It's between 16 and 18 months aging in barrels, and it's bottling in March 1 year after.
The age of the oak as well, Yves, for the red wines.
Yeah, so the barrels, in the average, I buy every year 10% of new oak. I have more than 2,000 barrels in my winery, and I buy 200 new barrels, 10%. And I keep the barrels 10 years. I use 5 years for my appellation, and after I use the barrels for my IGP wine. Like that, I keep my barrels 10 years. So the IGP use only the old barrels to preserve the fruities, and for the appellation, it's between new and 5 years old barrels.
And has your style of vinification changed throughout the years with climate change and global warming?
Yes, we have to. The global warming is really, when you are winemaker, you see the weather change, and
Sure.
Since I begin at the end of the 80s, the weather is totally different. Before we practice in Northern Rhone the chaptalization, so we have to add sugar because we never have enough concentration of sugar in the grapes. We harvest during the 90s at 11 the Syrah often, so we have to add 1 or 1.5 degree of sugar to make the wine, and we have a higher level of acidity. Now we harvest easily between 12.5 and 13.5. So now, for instance, in Northern Rhone, the global warming, it's a good thing for Northern Rhone, because before we have some difficulty to be ripe every vintage, and now it's more easy to be ripe perfect. The only thing I expect is not continue to be more and more sugar, because it will be too much. For instance, it's okay, but we have to change effectively the way to work in the vineyard and also in the vinification. During the 19, when the weather was more cool, I like to harvest with a surmaturity, very ripe, to have enough richness in the grapes. But now we have more more richness in the grapes, so I harvest a little early, not too much because you have to be ripe. But now I harvest a little more early. Uh, Yes,
So,
and we can produce also. We can adapt the yield because if you harvest too early with a bigger yield, you can harvest 1 or 2 weeks later, and it's better for the balance of the wine.
okay. So when you were harvesting in the 80s, roughly what was the picking date compared
Yes,
to when you pick now?
we harvest in the average certainly 2 weeks before the 80s, in the average.
Okay.
Before we begin the harvest, always the 20th of September, and now it's the first day of September.
So you've got
And we've got a question. Please may I ask if there is a new interest in acquisition of north-facing vineyards
Yes,
due to global warming?
in Northern Rhone, before the best place, it was the more warm place. It was south exposition. It was the very steep place. But with global warming, the too warm place, often we don't have enough acidity. We have too much alcohol, and now it's interesting to have some place with a less south, more east exposition and more high altitude, and with that you have now with the global warming a good balance.
Sure, sure.
And there's another question here from Nick asking, will the fact that there is more quality and consistency throughout the vintages due to global warming means less distinction between the vintages? Do you see there's less distinction vintage by each vintage? Are the vintages more, there's less differentiation between vintages?
Yes, now with the global warming, there is less difference between each vintage. It's more regular. The maturity is more regular, more easy to have. And before, when it was cooler, there is more difference. We have a very high quality vintage, but a very bad after. It was like that. It was more difference. For example, the sixth last year, it's very good vintage. It's very, but before we have a vintage 208, very cool. After we have 09, very warm. More difference between the vintage before.
Sure. And do you think, just in terms of for the wine, do you think that's a good thing with the weather at the moment, or a bad thing?
It's a
tricky question.
It's a good thing because it's more easy to, for instance, it's more easy to make more regular quality. The grapes are more ripe, more. But when it's too warm, you miss something. You miss the minerality, the balance, the expression of the terroir. More it's warm, you have less. You have more expression of the concentration and less expression of the terroir, of the finesse and the. So it's important to have a climate with a good balance, to have a good expression of terroir.
And I guess also that the other issue is not knowing what's going to happen each year, not just about the increase in the temperature, but how throughout the year you don't know if there's going to be more difficulties with, more extreme conditions. How's the year been so far, Yves? Is everything so far? Has it been quite a cool winter?
For instance, the past 2 years, it's a very dry winter. Normally, during the winter, we have more rain, and the river are high, and I'm a little afraid this year, and last year it was the same. We have a very low level of rain during the winter, and I'm a little afraid about that.
A glass of your Côte Rôtie Bonnevier, which is I highly recommend. It's beautiful. We actually opened it on the weekend, and it just keeps getting more and more beautiful. C'est très bon, c'est délicieux. C'est magnifique.
So I can say some more about the Côte Rôtie appellation. So Côte Rôtie, it's a 3 village. Saint-Cyr-sur-Rhône, Ampuis, and Tupin-Semont, 7 kilometers long. Now there is, I think it's more than, it's 320 hectares, I think now. And the 2 grape variety we use for Côte Rôtie is Syrah and Viognier. And that it's rare to have an appellation in France to make red with a white variety. And it's a very old tradition. It's, since the 18th, 19th century, there is always Côte Rôtie making with the 2 varieties, and Viognier planted to make a red. And that it's a very old tradition. And that is one particularity of the Côte Rôtie. It's to have these 2 varieties with a white since very long time.
And Yves, why do you think that is, out of interest? I mean, of course, it'll bring the freshness of the wine, but why not a different red grape? Why do you think that there is that tradition for Côte Rôtie?
So I read old book who speak about that. They use Viognier to make red because it says that it gives a balance of the wine. It makes the Syrah more soft, and Viognier have more high level of sugar too. And me, I like now, and for my cuvée of Côte Rôtie, I plant more and more Viognier. I try to have 10% of Viognier on each parcel. Because for me, it's really the story of Côte Rôtie to have a Viognier co-ferment with the Syrah.
And do you think with climate change, that's another reason to be planting more Viognier? Does it?
No. Me, it's really because it's the history, the tradition of Côte Rôtie. And so it's an old tradition, more than 2 centuries. So we have to continue this story of these 2 varieties. And the second thing about Côte Rôtie also, it's the difference of terroir. We have in the south the terroir of gneiss and granite, and in the north it's a schist soil. And we speak about Côte Blonde, Côte Brune. And so the south, the soil of the south give Côte Rôtie with more finesse, more elegance, and the schist soil from the north give Côte Rôtie with more body, and that also it's interesting in Côte Rôtie to have these 2 expressions of terroir.
Yeah. And we have a question from Pedro. He's asked, which vineyards are the best in Côte Rôtie? The ones near to the river or a bit higher up?
Which vineyard?
He's asked which vineyards are the best in Côte Rôtie? The ones close to the river or a bit higher altitude?
So it's what I explained about the global warming. Mm-hmm. I think before the best was the more warm. So yeah. in the bottom of the hill, in the very steep place, and in the more south exposition. But for me, it's beginning to change with the global warming. And now to have a good balance, more acidity, less alcohol, perhaps to be more high altitude and less south, more east, you begin to have more balance. So I think the best place change a little with the global warming.
We have another question from George Reed. Has the Bonneviere always been so fresh? How does this compare to the rest of Côte Rôtie from the Brune? So I'll repeat that. Has the Bonneviere always been so fresh? How does this compare to the rest of the Côte Rôties from the Brune?
Sounds like a poem.
I'm not sure to understand the question.
Est-ce que pourquoi le Bonneviere a été si frais?
Ah oui, oui.
Et comment est-ce que ça compare avec les autres côtes rôties qui sont sur la côte brune?
Yes, Bonneviere it's a special place because it's a cool place, and me I like this cuvée because one thing it's my old vines. It's a vineyard 60 years old and planted with the old variety we call Sorine, and that is one fact. But also Bonneviere it's a cool place, so because it's cool we harvest later, and the fact to harvest later the nights are more cool, more long, and you preserve more acidity when it begins to be ripe. And for Bonneviere, I always have a good balance, a good freshness, and so for me it's important the balance, and especially with the global warming. And we can compare with the other cuvées in high altitude now, in more late.
Yves, we have another question from Victor Bar. Is there any Viognier blended in the Bonneviere, and what is the proportion?
So before there is no Viognier in Bonneviere. It was only Syrah, but it begin to change because I begin to plant Viognier in this place, and with the last vintage I begin to have a small percentage. And the idea it's even in a Bonneviere it's to have a 5-10% of Viognier.
Okay.
But at the beginning it was only Syrah.
And then that kind of answers the next question as well. So that was Victor at Chez Bruce, and now we've got Bruce from Chez Bruce saying, is it obligatory to add Viognier to Côte Rôtie, or can it be 100% Syrah? So this wine is 100% Syrah, which is great in answering the question.
And we have a question from Jonathan Sutton. He's asked, we are tasting the Gamay 2019 for the first time. When does Yves think that this would be at its best?
So Gamay, it's not a variety from Northern Rhone because we don't have appellation with Gamay in Rhone Valley. But we are not far from Lyon, and Lyon it's Beaujolais, it's Coteaux du Lyonnais, sure. And there is a lot of Gamay not very far from Côte Rôtie, from Chavanais, and because Gamay it's a variety with more early variety. There is a tradition when we have a vineyard in a high altitude, the Syrah have difficulty to be ripe, so the last generation plant Gamay. So we have some vineyard planted in Gamay in Northern Rhone, and I make this cuvée, but I make a vinification in a Rhone style. I don't make a carbonic vinification like they do in Beaujolais. I make a traditional vinification, so it makes a Gamay, but perhaps more tannic, more yes, and certainly with aging potential. Yes.
Okay, great. And I know we've only got about 10-15 minutes left, Yves. So if you could tell us about your Condrieu as well, that would be wonderful.
Yes, Condrieu is very important for me. It's my older appellation, and I'm very proud of my Condrieu. So Condrieu, it's a small appellation under 200 hectares, 15 15 kilometers long, 7 villages, and only one grape variety, the Viognier. And one thing important to say is that in Northern Rhone, the Syrah for the red, the Viognier for the Condrieu, it's a local variety. The Viognier, the birthplace of Viognier, it's Condrieu. The birthplace of Syrah, it's Northern Rhone. And it means it's a variety very well adapted to the place, to the climate, to the terroir, and a good expression of the variety because it's the birthplace of this variety. And Viognier, it's aromatic variety. It's a smell violet, white flower, and apricot, peach, and so customers like the varietals aromas of the Viognier. It's an aromatic variety. Lot of people think it's a wine to drink young because the varietal aromas you have it during 3 years, and so Condrieu has the reputation to be a wine to drink young. But me, I think Viognier and Condrieu have a good potential of aging, and me, I like to drink Condrieu of 15, 20 years old. It's totally different, but it's also very interesting to drink with age.
Can you tell us, Yves, about your different cuvées of Condrieu?
Yes, I have 2 main cuvées in Condrieu. The more important cuvée, it's called La Petite Côte, and the second cuvée it's Les Chaillets. And these 2 cuvées is a blend of parcel, but all with the same kind of soil. We can see on the picture, La Petite Côte, it's come from the village of Chavanais mainly, and in Chavanais we have granite at Muscovite, we see on the picture, and Les Chaillets come from more the north of the appellation and also in the south, and the granite is biotite. And the Muscovite give Condrieu with more freshness, more floral expression, and the biotite make Condrieu more mineral, more rich, perhaps with a biotite interesting to drink with age, and perhaps the Muscovite is, because it's floral, it's fresh, you can drink perhaps more young. Okay. So it's my 2 main cuvées, Petite Côte and Chaillet. And I also have 2 single vineyards. One new, it's called Verlieu, and the second, it's called Vernon. So it's a small cuvée. And for these 2 single vineyards, I make an aging in barrels longer, and with the idea to make a Condrieu more to drink in the time.
We have a question from Marcel. What news on the progress of Seychelles to appellation?
So Seychelles, perhaps in 1 or 2 years, we will be appellation, but we will be only Côte du Rhône, because we have to beginning by, for instance, we are IGP, and the first thing to do is to be in the family of the Rhône Valley, in the Côte du Rhône. So now, since 3 years, we ask to be in the Côte du Rhône appellation, and perhaps to be in Côte du Rhône, it can spend 1 or 2 years more. But perhaps in 2 years, we will be Côte du Rhône appellation in Seychelles. Okay. And the idea, as soon we will be Côte du Rhône, it will be to ask to be cru after. So after, it will take 2-3 years more to be cru. So perhaps in 10 years, there will be another cru in Northern Rhone.
Brilliant. And there's actually a slightly different location. There's a question from Remy at the Gavroche who's saying, could you possibly speak about your US project? So your project in America?
So for me, it's very interesting because I always make vinification in my area where I was born, and when you are in your country, in your historical vineyard, you do the thing without reflection because it's a tradition to prune like this, to harvest at this time. When you are in the new world, you have to have more reflection because you don't know totally the adaptation of the climate of the variety with the soil, and so it's a different way to work, and it's a funny project to make a Syrah in totally different place than Northern Rhone. It's more warm, it's different maturity. So I learn a lot about that, and it's funny too to see what's happening in other places in the world and to say that. And because we are in the old world, it's old process, old tradition, and in the new world, it's other thing to think to. So for me, it's very funny to do that.
Yeah.
No, I can imagine it. It must be quite a change. And just another thing also that's been asked about is your restaurant, Yves. Because you've got a bistro, your bistro. Yes. What's the name of the bistro again? It is your. Yes. I think we all would like to come over to your bistro and say hello to you over there as well in the Rhone.
Yes.
Which sounds good. And yeah, Remy says thank you so much for answering that question as well. Brilliant. Great. Well, I think that's fantastic, Yves. Your wines are absolutely stunning, and it'll be a real treat to get to enjoy them over in the Rhone with you, hopefully at some point when we can actually go back to France again.
To do a long trip this summer, I think.
Well,
you won't be able to.
Let's see.
At some point.
I'm being optimistic.
But Yves, this has been very, very kind, and thank you very much. And we love the Rhone. We love your wines, and we can't wait to be able to come over and taste with you, see you, and enjoy the wonderful Northern Rhone. We love your wines anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yves. This has been wonderful. Really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Bye.
Yves.
Thank you, Yves.
Bye.
Thank you.